everybody. Holy cow, there's become a lot of you. Um, I am a grateful and enthusiastic member of Codependents Anonymous. My name is Ritchard, and I'm codependent as hell.
And I'm Karen Kay, and I'm also a member of Codependents Anonymous, and I'm very grateful to be here today.
And anytime that we do something like this, we like to start with a prayer. We like to start with a particular prayer. So if you would indulge us, higher power, help us today to set aside the things we think we know. Help us to set aside everything that we think we know about you, everything we think we know about ourselves, everything we think we know about other people, and everything we think we know about this program, all so that we can have a new experience in you, a new experience in ourselves, a new experience in these, our fellows, and a new experience in our own recovery. Thanks for listening. So, ground rules. For those of you that haven't joined us, this is the third session where we've tried to do a little bit of a deep dive into two of the promises. For those of you that haven't joined us before, a couple of things that you need to know. What's going to happen here is that we are going to read you a little bit of stuff. It's out of a draft of a booklet that some of us are working on CoDA's 12 promises. So we'll read a little passage, the essay section from that, and then probably riff a little bit on what that promise means to us and in our recovery. Then we're going to start asking questions. And what we're trying to do is to invite you into a dialogue. So the first thing you need to know is that this isn't a meeting. This is a workshop. And we're much more interested in dialogue than in sharing. When we put out a question, we're just we're looking for an honest answer to that question. We'd rather have an exchange of ideas in this environment. We can have a meeting on the promises at any time, but this is a chance to actually sit and talk about them. So if you would indulge us in that, I think we'll have some fun today. You want to do it?
I think that sounds wonderful.
Okay, so I'm going to take the lead on Promise 5. Karen's going to take the lead on Promise 6. We're going to go to probably a little bit after the hour on Promise 5, take a break, and then come back for Promise 6. Promise 5, I know a new love and acceptance of myself and others. I feel genuinely lovable, loving, and loved. For many of us, the core of our codependency is that we never felt lovable, loving, and loved. The desperate desire to feel loved, to belong, harmed our self-esteem and led us to compliant behaviors that further damaged our already low self-esteem. The fear of rejection and abandonment fueled our attempts to control others. Our fear of being hurt drove us to practice avoidance. In CoDA, we met fellow members who committed to loving us until we could love ourselves. They modeled unconditional love for us and supported and applauded our efforts to behave in loving ways. One day, perhaps out of the blue, the thought may occur to us, these people and my higher power love me, therefore I must be lovable. The logic is irrefutable. Working the steps allows us to engage in estimable acts, and we slowly build self-esteem. Eventually, we may suddenly realize that we like ourselves, we respect ourselves, we even love ourselves. We realize that we love these people in our groups and others in our lives, and we learn new ways to express that love. We stop confusing love with approval or sex and find that once we love ourselves, we can be loving toward even the difficult people in our lives. You know, for me, I got here with a distorted perspective, a distorted definition of love. And I had to come to CoDA to realize that real love is a verb, not a noun. It's rooted in my actions and my attitudes rather than being a feeling. I thought that love was all about that feeling. No, that's endorphins and hormones. real love, I needed a new definition. The working definition that I work with these days focuses on a genuine desire for someone else's uh, uh, long-term good and a willingness to be inconvenienced in order to see that happen. The idea that I meet you and I like you and I want the best for you, and I'm willing to get off the couch to do something about it. Um, I had to come here to learn that I can be angry with someone and still take a loving attitude toward them. Um, I had to come here to discover that what I had before wasn't loving relationships. What I had was obsessions. What I had was parasitic entanglements. Uh, I had no concept of unconditional love, which we talk about a lot when we talk about tradition 8. The idea that my love always had a price tag. I always wanted something from that person, even if it was just acceptance or approval in exchange for my loving actions. Uh, so now I try to maintain a loving attitude toward the people around me. What's happened for me here is that I do know that new sense of love and acceptance of myself and others. Another thing that I had to learn here was that perspective of loving myself. I would turn myself inside out, seeking someone else's approval, thinking that was love. I would abuse myself horribly in pursuit of acceptance and approval from someone else, thinking that was love. What I've learned now is that not just to look at the lady beside me or the people in my group or the people in my family with a loving attitude, but to look at the guy in the mirror with a loving attitude, to remember that again, love shows up in my actions. So to take actions that are in Ritchard's long-term best interest, even if it means being inconvenienced in order to see that happen. Um, if Karen had ever said to me, "Ritchard, I'm really busy. I need a doctor's appointment. Can you make a doctor's appointment for me?" I would have been all over that because there's a payoff there of approval. But to think of making a doctor's appointment for myself, no, like because I was the last consideration on my list. So I want you to know that yesterday I made myself a doctor's appointment, and this coming week I'll be making dentist appointment and an optometrist appointment because I'm coming up in the cycle. And it's time for those things, and those are loving actions that I take for Ritchard. And because I am comfortable being Ritchard now for the first time in my life, it lets me take a more mature, more responsible look at loving actions toward the people around me. The idea that I'm willing and able to take loving actions on behalf of somebody else, even if, as we sometimes talk about when we talk about Tradition 12, it's not the popular action. Because sometimes the loving thing to do for someone else is to say no. And they may not be happy about that. But if I love them enough, I'm willing to endure even that disapproval in order to take a loving action. What would you like to add?
Would I like to add? Just, well, first of all, Promise 5, I'm going to just read that one again, is I know a new love and acceptance of myself and others. I feel genuinely lovable, loving, and loved. Because just reflecting on how much Tradition 5 Promise 5 is linked to tradition 7. That idea that we ought to be fully self-supporting, right? And to me, when I think about tradition 7, that involves physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, and I need to be able to do that for myself. I agree absolutely that love is an action. It's not necessarily a feeling. I think that my higher power, has a lot of feelings involved in that concept of love. Like when I was 16, that idea of I want to be in love with somebody, I want somebody to love me, but it was a feeling. And I think my higher power designs that so that humanity procreates, right? So that idea of we need to learn to love ourselves. I needed to learn to love myself before I could love somebody else. And I didn't know that. I really didn't. I thought when growing up that to do it for others and put yourself last was a loving act. I was taught some things that weren't very emotionally self supporting, that weren't very loving, and that actually depleted my soul. So, one of the things that I like to do for myself, and I encourage my sponsees to do, is um, what I call the mirror exercise. And there's variants on a mirror exercise. And this sounds so easy and so hard to do. And it's the mirror exercise that I will do is I'll go to the mirror, I'll look at myself in the eyes in a mirror and actually make eye contact. Now I can put on makeup without making eye contact with myself. I know that sounds really strange, but so look myself in the eyes and like, Karen, you are a special child of God. God knows you and loves you and cares for you just the way you are right now. And so do I. I challenge people to actually do that for themselves for at least 30 days. Once, maybe twice a day, whatever you're comfortable with. And it's amazing the difference that making eye contact with myself and the people that I have spoken to who actually have taken up the challenge know that it actually starts to change. And I need to be able to have some self love before I can genuinely um, love somebody else. It's like I can't give from that place I do not have to give from. So that's all I'm going to add.
Even I'll sometimes tell the guys I sponsor, when you've done something well, look in the mirror and tell that guy, "Good job."
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that in this booklet that's coming together we're talking about is using the promises as tools for recovery. And one of the things that comes up there is how can I use Promise 5 as a tool and aid of my recovery. And one of the things that I have done is to use it as a tool for inventory, to look at a particular relationship and ask myself, in that relationship, do I feel genuinely lovable, loving, and loved? And if so, great. If not, then what am I going to do about it? What are my available options? Maybe that's a relationship that I'm better off without. If it's a relationship that I'm unwilling to let go of, then what other things am I willing or able to do in that relationship? Maybe there's some boundaries that I need to set. Um, but that then becomes a tool in my pursuit of healthy and loving relationships, which of course is the only reason that we're members here. So get into some discussion here. And first question I'd like to throw out is how, in the time that you've been in CoDA, how has your definition of love changed? Talk a little bit about how mine has changed. Karen, how's yours changed?
Definition of love?
Yeah.
Largely, it's again realizing that love isn't a feeling; it is an action. It's a decision, in part, right? In that, in order to be in a healthy and loving relationship, I not only need to be committed to my own spiritual growth, I also need to be committed to my partner's, and that it has to be reciprocal as well. So my partner needs to be committed to his spiritual growth and also to mine, so that we can actually um, have have a healthy and loving interaction together. That idea that it's a hard concept, that love is not just feeling, right? It takes time, and it takes what I would do with that idea is I actually meditated on that for a while, and what does that mean to me, and played it over in my mind before I could actually accept that for myself to actually be a reality. And I really loved what you said about not abandoning yourself. I think that I can only speak for myself, but like in people I've spoken with regularly as well, that if we're coming into a relationship, it's not uncommon for a lot of us, myself included, to put our best foot forward and do and do and do and do. In a lot of ways, that's not really honest. We're not showing the other person who we truly are. And so being able to be more loving, accepting, and grounded in myself, I bring myself to that to a relationship rather than a fiction.
The I think there's a lot to be said for the idea that I'm not capable of real love until I love myself. Because here's the deal: until I love Richard, I can't trust that the love that you're portraying toward me is real, because I'm convinced deep inside that I'm not worth it. So until I can love me, I can't wholeheartedly accept love from you. I think that what you just said uh, summarizes a lot of what's been said previously here. That idea, again, that as long as my so-called love is just in pursuit of someone else's approval and acceptance, uh, it's transactional. It's love with a price tag, and that's not real love. And so we have to get to that point where we're, as Karen said, self-supporting emotionally, self-supporting in the love sphere, uh, before we can have deep and meaningful, loving relationships with other people.
And part of that, as you already mentioned, is the idea of setting boundaries, appropriate boundaries. Um, and realizing that when we set a boundary is some basics that a lot of us don't realize. I certainly didn't when I first started setting boundaries. Is that it actually has to have a consequence. I used to express an awful lot of preferences without any actual consequences. So self love requires that I actually learn how to set loving boundaries and skip the ultimatums that I used to really love to do. Loved ultimatums, and I thought those were invitations and boundaries, and I was incorrect.
One of the important things I heard in what you just said is a call to contrary action. I'm and that dovetails nicely with where I wanted to go next with this. Um, the I firmly believe that all recovery is based on contrary action, taking actions that are contrary to my defaults, to my automatic reactions. Uh, I love our cliches around here. If you want what you always got, do what you always did. But if you want something different, you're going to have to do something different. Another of our cliches: this is a program of action. It is not a program of thinking, and it's certainly not a program of feeling. We take an unaccustomed action, we have a new experience, and that new experience informs our feelings. And so we get to have a new feeling. And I think that really shows up in Promise 5. The idea that I have to approach love differently in order to experience it differently. And that's been a big deal for me. So my question is, what can you do to maintain a loving attitude? What can you do to focus on taking loving actions toward the people in your life? One of those is a little exercise that I like to give to sponsees. I like to say I seem to get a lot of sponsees who are going through life with volatile women, and often when they get here, the relationship's a little bit rocky. And so one of the first exercises that I ask them to go through is to on at least once a day find something real to thank or to compliment your mate for every day, and just see what happens. And often they find that first of all, their mate is a little friendlier toward them, and secondly, that they feel better about their mate. They've taken an unaccustomed action, and it's resulted in a new feeling. So
I was just going to say that really dovetails with that idea of treating your mate with respect and courtesy. Not being curt.
Trying to do that, and trying to do that no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
So, what actions can you take, or do you take, or have you taken to try to maintain a loving attitude, to try to focus on taking loving actions? And by the way, how's that turned out for you?
One of the things that's really kind of cool to do if you're trying to learn how to be more loving or take loving actions is to do one nice thing and try not to get found out.
Yeah, the anonymous good deed. You make an excellent point that for those of us who suffer from codependence, and especially sometimes in early recovery, those impulses can be problematic, and sometimes the answer is don't just do something, sit there.
And if we are in the habit of always doing and trying to make everything better, stepping back, evaluating is taking contrary action. So it all depends on the perspective that one takes.
Yeah, we like to boil that one down to, because everything around here is about the third step, right? Made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of a higher power, and I don't know how to do that. Everything that we do around here is in support of that decision, trying to get better at figuring out what's my higher power's will in this situation. And a big one with impulses in particular is, my will is a constant urgency, God's will is a calm certainty. I listen to the tone of voice that's telling me to take an action. If it's yammering and insistent, that's probably my illness talking again. If it's that calm, quiet voice that says, "Richard, it's okay, just do this, and everything will be fine," that's usually my higher power's voice.
And if it's in between, call your sponsor.
There you go. One of the most important things that I was taught in early recovery was that it's not always about me. And the way it was put to me is, maybe they missed their morning coffee. Maybe they just got really bad news. Maybe their underwear's too tight. But it may not be about you, Richard.
The truth in that. So it's just after 3 o'clock. Well, 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. To point that one out. So, do you want to take a break now?
This is probably a good time for our little break.
So we're going to go on with Promise 6, and again, for those of you who have newly joined us or were late to joining us previously, what we're going to read essay that's actually from a draft that is in progress. It may at some point be submitted to become conference approved literature, but at this time it's a draft and it is not published. So, promise 6. I learned to see myself as equal to others. My new and renewed relationships are all with equal partners. Flatter thinking is a hallmark of the disease of codependence. Most of us saw the people around us as above us and to be obeyed, or as beneath us to be fixed or saved. In many of our relationships, we were dependent on the approval of others, and our relationships were automatically out of balance. Dependence on external approval meant that we would hand over all our power to anyone who asked for it, or seemed to ask for it, or might ask for it. Since nobody respects a doormat, our self-esteem plummeted. In our relationships, we may have seen the other person not as a person, but as the locus for problems we could solve. We reasoned that if we were such a mess, the noble thing to do, and we thought we were so very noble, was to fix it, was to step in and fix the problem for them. At first, they were often grateful, and we gained a temporary boost to our ego. But in solving their problems, we took control, or the illusion of control, of a swath of the person's life. We had to. We were much more qualified to be in charge than they. If and when the other person realized how we viewed them, they may have been hurt or offended. In CoDA, the 12 steps cultivate humility in us. Humility is not humiliation, but rather a proportionate, realistic view of ourselves and the view of others. We learn to identify, don't compare. The 12 traditions teach us that the only person responsible for solving another person's problems is them. Tradition 7. We learn to see where we stop and another person begins. Tradition 4. Most of all, we learn that we are all equals. Tradition 2. Without the pressure to jockey for position on an imaginary ladder, we are free to be ourselves. We learn to relate to others exactly where they are, and they do the same with us. So, once again, promise 6, I learned to see myself as equal to others. My new and renewed relationships are all with equal partners. Pre-program, this was so very true for me. I actually had that vision of being on a ladder. There were people above me, there were people below me, but there were very few people that were on the same rung as I was. On ladders, there's not much room on the same rung of a ladder for more than one person. And I always, it was great to have people below me, so and was trying to climb higher so that I didn't feel inferior. But most of the people, when I looked at it pre-program, I really did feel were above me in some way, and a lot of this, it always comes down to low self-esteem. That idea that I wasn't good enough. The radio that played in my head telling me I was ugly, stupid, dumb, and inferior. And if anybody knew the real me, they would just toss me aside. So I always felt as though I had to prove myself to whoever they were. And usually they were just fictions. It's all illusions in my own head, or at least the vast majority of it was. So coming into program and actually looking at other individuals as individuals, that we are on equal footing. Somebody might have be really great in one area of life and not so great in another, and we complement each other. We can't all be good at the same thing, and that is a benefit. I mean, that really, as a whole, creates us as a whole stronger. When we come into these meetings, we're all in different types of professions, and we have different experiences, different backgrounds, different beliefs, and it's coming in and knowing that I am accepted for who I am, and I can look at other people and accept them for who they are, and I can learn from their experiences, and it actually rounds out my thinking. It makes me bigger than I can ever be by myself, if that makes any sense to you. Right? I get to learn. I'm so very very grateful for that. And in order for myself to be an equal partner, I also need to participate in my life. I need to be an active participant in my life. Again, the traditions come into play here. Um, the idea that the group conscience, everybody has a right to participate. I need to know where I begin and where I end, who I am, and all of these things come gradually. For me, it's only by coming back to meetings. It's by listening to other people. Slowly the concepts start to sink in. And I do mean for me, some days it's very slowly. And being able to say, that's okay. This is where I am right now. And somebody will, I've gone to meetings, and I'm sure you have had this experience as well, where there's somebody where that might be in the meeting and you think, oh, them again. They have, I don't really get much out of what they share. And that day they'll bring the gem that changes your life. It's changed mine. It's like, I never thought of anything like that before. What a great gift. So looking for the gift in everybody sharing in the rooms is really been an opportunity to grow for me and has helped me to step down from the ladder. And I have to watch it because sometimes I can get back up into that ladder thinking. Um, Humility was also talked about in that reading. That's something that's very important because I really do need to come back to step 3 each day and turn my will and my life over the care of my higher power and ask my higher power to help me be an instrument, to work through me as opposed to me trying to play God. That certainly doesn't work. Richard?
Well, just to pick up on what Karen was just saying, my second ever CoDA meeting, there was somebody there, it was her first ever CoDA meeting. And she said something in that meeting that has been a fundamental cornerstone of the inventory process for me since that day. Just, one of the most important things I've ever learned. And never once in a meeting since then did she ever say anything I found useful. But that day she changed my life. One of the most important things that happens for me in recovery is this idea that I've come to learn that I am the treasured child of a loving higher power. And therefore, I don't need to crawl before anybody. And by the way, Ritchard, all these other people around you, they are also the treasured children of that loving higher power and not to be looked down upon. And so what happens for me, again, I love those cliches. Fake it till you make it. Act as if is one of the most powerful recovery tools we're ever given. And so I use Promise 6 as a tool in my recovery probably more often than any of the other promises, simply by asking the question of, if I was an equal partner, what would I do here? What would an equal partner do in this relationship, in this situation? And then act as if, even if I don't feel it. That's the power of act as if. Is I take actions that reflect the person I want to grow into.
That thought goes in really well with the mirror exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Karen, you are a child of God. Children of God they're not doormats. We are equal. We're all children of God. We are not a doormat.
And again, like reflecting back to what I was talking about in Promise 5, I can also use Promise 6 as an inventory tool. Do I feel like an equal partner in this relationship? And if not, what do I need to do about it? That's about all I got.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw out a question, and you're more than welcome to speak to it. So, one that really struck me was, what codependent patterns kept me from participating in my relationships as an equal? There's kind of a second part to that. What defects of character drove those patterns? So, once again, what codependent patterns kept me from participating in my relationships as an equal? And what defects of character drove those patterns? One of the things that brought up for me was the idea of putting a sponsor on a pedestal. Whether I when I put my sponsor on a pedestal, and she it displayed her own humanity, I got very disappointed. Right? And it took me a while to actually come to realize that no, that's her stuff, and she is human as well. And I will tell people that, my sponsees, is don't put me on a pedestal, because I will guarantee you one thing: I will fail you. And you will get ticked off with me. I hope you do. And it's okay, because we are equals and we're here for each other. We are walking together. Um, so that's kind of the things that came to my mind when you were speaking. I don't know about. I know this isn't a workshop on 6 and 7, but it's that idea where when a defective character comes up, I just get to, like, for myself, I get to see it more and more and more intensely, and it's an interesting experience. Well, awareness, like when you're speaking, I'm thinking of the 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and then action, and they need to come in that order. So the awareness, when we're in awareness, it can really be painful, and it's that coming to self-love, which are talked about in Promise 5, and accepting where we are. And this is just a part of who we are, and it's not, might be something that we don't really care to look at, but it's just, we're human. And personally, I think that if my higher power wanted me to be perfect, my higher power would have made me that way. And apparently that wasn't the plan.
Yeah, and rigidity can be seductive to codependents because, at the very least, if we're rigid about things, then outcomes become more predictable. And predictability gives us the illusion of control. Uh, Unfortunately, it's all an illusion,
Mhm.
and sooner or later we crash into the reality of the chaos that is the human experience. Well, I think what I would remember is that in the 12-step recovery community as a whole, it's customary that we refrain from crosstalk in most cases. But CoDA is the only fellowship of which I'm aware that actually has a prohibition against crosstalk. In other fellowships, there are groups where crosstalk isn't just allowed, but by group conscience, it's encouraged. There are crosstalk meetings out there. I don't personally go to them, but but they're out there, and the people who go there seem to love them. So I would remember that if that is a group where crosstalk is allowed by custom or by group conscience, um, that okay, maybe I don't want to go to that group. And if it's not allowed by custom or group conscience, then I would like to think that I would raise the issue and set a boundary.
One of one of the things that comes to mind for me is, I want to be perfect at something right here, right now, without ever having gone through the pain of learning. Kind of like the drawing that was being talked about previously. Right? I want to be a perfect drawer without ever having to learn to do it. And I want to be fit and healthy, uh, right here, right now. So one of the things that I do is, I actually, when I get up in the morning, I think about Tradition 7. I don't actually go to a gym, but I do my stuff in the comfort of my home, because it fits my personality. Because I realize if I went to the gym, I might as well just go to the bathroom and throw money down the toilet, right? So that awareness is important. I know it sounds goofy, but it's important. I need to know that, right? And then for myself in the morning, it's like tradition 7, and that's one of the things I think about all the time. And I'm using a exercising example, personal for me, but it works for other things too. It's the every group ought to be fully self-supporting. Taken to an individual level, I need to be fully self-supporting. What does that mean? Physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. Right? So, some days I just want to go back to bed. I just do, and it's like, Karen, you know, tradition 7, physically self-supporting, and I get myself off, get myself up, and I do what I need to do, and I feel so much better, right? Um, so I have to, I too want to be able to get to somebody else's level without the work. Like that's for me, right? That's what I want to do, and it's like that's not. So I pray about it. I think about the traditions. I may write about it depending on how deep that runs for me. I talk to my sponsor. That's a big one. Sometimes it's, I need to be able to get out of my own head and get a different perspective on who I am and what I'm capable of. It's kind of like watching a toddler grow. They're really fun to watch, and especially a little one that's learning how to walk. They fall down a lot, and that's like me, new in program. I fall down a lot. There's some real basics that I don't even know how to pick up the tools. So it takes time, and it takes that I try and have patience with myself. And I'm learning how to walk, and I need others in the program to walk with me, to hold my hands and give me strength.
Yeah, the other thing there is that I learned here that comparing is always a losing proposition, because I don't know what's going on inside that person. I can't know what's going on inside that person. So by default, I am always comparing my inside to their outside. I'm comparing how I feel to how they look.
How I think they look.
Yeah, every time. And I will come away the loser every time. And this has been fun, guys.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I can't speak for Ritchard. Do you want to?
I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be
See,
here.
I'm just trying to practice the traditions and all, speaking for other people. So with that, I do want to thank you all for participating. I had a really good time.